Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Push with Nick and KP. We are back once again to continue our WrestleMania series. This time, we are working on WrestleMania 18, which took place in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, at the Toronto Sky Dome on March 17th, 2002. The announced attendance for this event was 68,237. This is the second Mania to take place here in Toronto, the last one being WrestleMania 6 in 1990. And until the recent 2027 WrestleMania in Saudi announcement, this was the first, or excuse me, the last international Mania. So, but we are rooting for you, KP. We do want that UK Mania still, and I have a feeling we are going to get it eventually. Um, the tagline for this Mania were Icon versus Icon, the absolute best ever, and the one and only. So three of them. Make of that what you will. This was the very last WrestleMania under the WWF name, and before the first ever brand split for Raw and SmackDown. That kind of draft that they did. Uh, these changes both took place after this Mania. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the opening contest for WrestleMania, which once again was the Intercontinental Championship, the exact same way we kicked off 17. This has Rob Van Dam making his WrestleMania debut, going up against William Regal, defending his Intercontinental Championship. KP, what did you make of this opening bout of WrestleMania 18?
Yeah, pretty good matchup here to get things started for WrestleMania 18. IC title on the line. Was great to see Rob Van Dam in action here. Just very aware of everything that he does throughout his career and stuff. But yeah, just seeing him put a smile on my face. Definitely a guy that I always tend to enjoy. Whenever he's in the ring. But this one was a pretty technical display. It's quite fast paced as well. There's a mix of styles here. You had obviously the very sort of like slow progressive technical wizardry of William Regal, and then you got that fast-paced sort of crazy display from Rob Van Dam. And I just think they sort of blended their styles quite well here together. Didn't seem to be like out of place at any point between the two of them. And just generally speaking, yeah, I quite like this matchup. Also, the crowd loved the result as well. They went crazy at the end here when Rob Van Dam would pick up the victory. We get to that point though because Regal he would go for the brass knuckles quite early in the contest. Doesn't get to use them though. Instead, Rob Van Dam knocks them out of his hand. They go wailing to ringside. Later on in the match, like pretty close to the end here, Regal goes to ringside at one point and he grabs the knuckles whilst he's out there. He brings them back into the ring. He attempts to use them, but the referee takes them from him. And Regal goes to his underwear then whilst the referee distracted, dealing with those knuckles, and brings out another pair of knuckles. RVD, though, is one step ahead, as he was earlier in the matchup as well. He kicks Regal in the face, knocking him down, and the brass knuckles unable to be used. He then hits his frog splash from the top and gets the win and becomes the Intercontinental Champion. But yeah, this one was a fun matchup. It was it just worked well. The match together was pretty decent. And generally speaking, yeah, the crowd had a great pop when Rob Van Dam won that title at the very end. But yeah, I thought the match flowed nicely. So would have liked a few more minutes. Think it maybe was a little short. That's my main critique here from this one. But we do say that about a lot of these matches on these WrestleMania reviews. So you can only do so much with I think it was 11 matches on this card. So again, I think that's what it was for 17. You can't have them all going like 15, 20 minutes long because we'll be here forever otherwise. So I get that some matches do have to be a little bit quicker, a little bit shorter, and that's fine. But what we got, I thought it was pretty good. And yeah, I gave it a 7 out of 10. Not a bad start to WrestleMania, just a pretty solid, decent matchup to begin with. So, Nick, what did you make of this one for the IC title, William Regal and RVD?
Yeah, it makes you wonder, like, today's WrestleMania split into 2 days, how much these WrestleManias would have benefited because this was a 3 hour and 45-minute show. But somehow, this match only being 6 minutes, as you mentioned, definitely could have benefited. Imagine, 5 more minutes. Similar to the that trope that we use so many times throughout this WrestleMania series. This was already a good match, I think. With that 5 more minutes, it could have been a great match. So, yeah, Rob Van Dam looking good here, and William Regal just very kind of reliable, I think, and kind of basically we. This is the same way we started 17. We just replaced Chris Jericho with Rob Van Dam, and so the styles definitely gelling well together, the same as they did last year with 17. So yeah, I think this match was good. Regal going for those brass knucks. Basically, that was kind of the story here. And then RVD kind of making him regret it and getting his IC championship to Rob Van Dam. So yeah, similar to the same match last year. This one was good, not great, but the styles of them was was great. They merged well together, and the only issue with this one for me was it just didn't feel like it was that Mania worthy match. So I gave this one a 6 out of 10. Like I said, a good match, just needed a bit more time. So with that, let's get into the second match, which is yet another title match. This one has Christian going up against DDP, who has come over from the WCW buyout. A lot of talent throughout the night. You'll see fresh faces because of that WCW buyout from WWE. So what'd you make of this one, KP? Christian finally on his own. Obviously panned out pretty well as a tag team from 16 and 17, but not quite the same result here. What'd you make of this one?
Yeah, not quite the same result for Christian going solo after those very impressive and crazy tag team matches that they had in 16 and 17. But yeah, this one for the European Championship, Diamond Dallas Page, defending it against Christian. This one was pretty decent. It was quite fast paced, and it started off quite aggressively even before the bell rang. Christian just sort of like laying into a DDP, so you sort of felt some animosity there between the two men, which is quite nice. Considering how long this match was, it wasn't very long. It was pretty short, so I think it was probably around similar length to that of the previous match we just discussed. I don't know the exact time frame here, but it seemed to go by pretty quickly. But for what it was, I thought it was pretty back and forth, and I think that aggression from the early stages sort of like flowed throughout the matchup as well. Yeah, it wasn't bad. It was a decent match, to be fair. Christian hits an inverted DDT before almost getting rolled up after a pretty close near fall. That promotes Page to get back up to his feet. He hits a diamond cutter after a few back and forth moves from the two of them, and that allows him to get the victory over Christian in this matchup. But yeah, pretty quick. It felt fast paced throughout the matchup, and it was pretty decent. We had a little bit of post match situation as well with DDP taking to the mic, and he would praise Christian for not losing his temper. He'd say in front of the thousands of fans in attendance and the ones watching at home that, it was an achievement that is quite impressive, and it's not a bad thing, but it's a good thing. Christian then does indeed have a temper tantrum in the ring as Diamond Dallas Page leaves with a championship, and Christian is just rolling around, thudding the mat. It was, quite an interesting last little moment here for this contest. But yeah, in terms of the match itself, yeah, I guess not too bad. Like I say, it was just short, so you can't really do too much with it, but what we got, I guess it was kind of decent enough. I gave it a 6 out of 10 for this one. Not too bad, but would have wanted a bit more, and I think these guys could have put on a pretty good match if they had a bit longer over time, but yeah, not too bad overall, though.
And I think that's a theme with a lot of these matches. It is the first one. I mentioned during 17 that was my biggest nostalgia mania, and a lot of the talent. That's where I hooked on to them. But with this one, it's kind of the same story. Like I know these talents in the ring can put on a good match, but the time that they're given is just not enough. And so it's very similar to the first match of WrestleMania 18. I know both Christian and DDP can put on a good match, but this one just felt like it was a bit short, and so because of that, it wasn't as good as it could have been. Yeah, this Christian character though, it's interesting. It felt like he's a little different than his Agent Christian character in terms of looks, but in terms of his attitude, definitely took a downward spiral from his Agent Christian days. Yeah, this one was yeah just needed more time, and I hate to say that so often, but just didn't feel that much different than like a weekly show. That's kind of how I took it. So I gave this one rating 5.5 out of 10. Um, yeah, it could have been good, just didn't have the time. Getting into the next match, which is shorter, um, at least in the match aspect of it, clocking in around 3 minutes. However, this match does go on kind of because it's in that format we know now as the 24/7 most recently 24/7 title, where essentially if you win this title you have to defend it 24/7. Fun fact for this one, this match put together and was added to the card the day before Mania. So at the time, Maven is the Hardcore Championship defending against Goldust. And I know what you're thinking. There's no way this masterpiece of a match could have been thrown together so close to the actual event, but that is accurate. Uh, yeah, I thought for the match, for the match that we have here, can you rate that one for us, KP? And then I think probably the best approach here, go ahead and just talk about what happened after the actual first part of the match here, because obviously we see lots of run-ins that throughout the night. It is an interesting way to go about it. But what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, this is quite the long one here, so let me get into it. So Goldust and Maven for starters here in that matchup. Yes, this one was really quick. There isn't really too much to talk about. Hardcore Championship being on the line, it gets to a point where Goldust and Maven hit each other with with trash can lids. They're sort of like spray painted gold. Obviously with the Goldust gimmick, I'm assuming that's basically for. And it gets to a situation where Goldust falls to the outside. He crashes down at ringside, and then Maven, he just falls into the middle of the ring, I suppose, onto the mat. We then just, as this is going on, so the commentators have already sort of alluded earlier in the night, saying that the Hardcore title is under 24/7 rules. And for those of us that are familiar with the 24/7 Championship, that normally means that these rules get suspended during matches. However, at this particular point, it wasn't the case. So the 24/7 title was was a little bit different in that respect. This Hardcore Championship being under those rules meant that those 24/7 rules actually apply during the match itself. So with Maven down in the ring after the trash can spot, we then just randomly get Spike Dudley coming down with his own referee, and he just pins Maven to win the Hardcore Championship. So it was between Goldust and Maven, it was an okay match. It was, too short. It was kind of fun while it lasted. And the finish was kind of unexpected, even though commentary did allude already to the fact that these rules were currently ongoing. But for some reason, I still didn't actually expect it to happen during the matchup, so I was quite surprised by that. Maybe foolishly, perhaps. So the match itself, I'll give a 5 out of 10, just purely for the fact that it happened, and it's got a talking point, and it was kind of fun when it was on, but it was very short. So I think that's fair. After this, we get a backstage segment featuring Spike Dudley, Crash Holly, and Al Snow. It eventually ends up with Hurricane just swooping on in, though, and pinning Spike Dudley to win the Hardcore Championship. Later on in the night, Mighty Molly comes up to the side of Hurricane whilst he's being interviewed by Coach, and she feigns pointing him towards the Hurricycle, and instead knocks him out with a frying pan before then pinning him to become the Hardcore Champion. We continue. As the show goes on, this is a lot later on now. Mighty Molly is just walking along backstage, through this really tight corridor, and there's this door in front of her, and it swings open and hits her in the face. She gets sent crashing onto the floor, and then sort of weirdly revealed, you just see the legs of the person who pushed the door open, and then once they bring the door back, it's revealed to be Christian, who then pins Mighty Molly to get the victory and become the Hardcore Champion at that time. Then just before the main event, we see Christian looking to leave the arena and to escape with his Hardcore Championship. He gets his bags and stuff into a taxi, and then looks to get in it himself. And as he's sort of showboating, looking to leave the arena, he then gets rolled up by Maven from behind, and he then pins him to become the new Hardcore Champion, and he escapes the arena in Christian's taxi with his belongings, by the way, as well, the luggage and stuff that he'd already put in. So Maven started the night as the Hardcore Champion, lost it. There were a few champions in between, and then Maven ended up being the Hardcore Champion by the end and escaping the arena. So make of that what you will. It was a pretty weird situation ever developing throughout the course of the night. And just added a little bit of comic relief, I guess, whilst these other matches were taking place, and we were getting the reactions from those and stuff whilst they were going on. Yeah, it was it added a little bit of depth, I suppose, different thing to focus on. But yeah, that's how it went down. Maven started and ended the night as the Hardcore Champion with a few in between. So yeah, a bit crazy. But what did you make of the whole shenanigans, Nick? it was it was interesting for sure, especially despite Dudley part. I for some reason didn't expect it, even though commentary basically alluded to it anyway. Did you really see that coming, or is it something that you were like, I'm not surprised by this?
At this point, I'm kind of out of the Attitude Era. Obviously, the turn at 17 was officially to mark the end of the Attitude Era. So at this point, I'm not thinking those kind of things are going to happen. So no, I didn't see the Spike thing coming. And um, I think the hardcore title is kind of holding on to that kind of era, if you will. To expect the unexpected with the hardcore stuff. So I think that's kind of the last bit holding on to it. But yeah, the I like the gold plated weapons. Those were kind of cool. And like you said, the only 3 minutes. So the match was going good until it wasn't. Um, but yeah, Spike coming in to get the win, just kind of the beginning of the shenanigans, as you kind of alluded to, going through all of this. It is essentially what we know now as a 24/7 title. Just took place throughout the night. So it was, like you said, it was a nice break in the action. Definitely not going to win match of the year or match of the night or anything close to it. I actually put this one down as the worst match of the night. So take that for what you will. It is kind of just that chaotic hardcore scene. So I gave this one a 3.5 out of 10. Obviously, with only 3 minutes, that's very hard to rate. But so I ended up just kind of grouping it all together, just the moments that it provided us, but still kind of hard to measure as an actual match. So yeah, it's just kind of is what it is. Doesn't feel like it belongs on the Mania stage. I think that's kind of my overall, and kind of going with the theme of the first two. It just doesn't feel like it's living up to the Mania expectations quite yet. So with that, we'll go ahead and move into the next match, which in my opinion is the first good match of Mania, and this has Kurt Angle going up against Kane. Obviously, two proven talents and two names we know quite well today. KP, what did you make of this contest here?
Yeah, this was a solid match. I really enjoyed this one. Just thought the dynamic between both men was great. We get Angle cutting a promo just before the start of the matchup, basically saying how he won his gold medal. Unlike the Canadians who won their ice skating medal, if he'd won it like they had, then he'd shoot himself in the head. So, sort of like trying to get some heelish heat to begin with here. He calls out the Canadians for winning those medals at the Olympics as whining and complaining until eventually they were given those gold medals in the end. So he said that he did his in the old-fashioned way by earning it. He goes to address Kane, and then Kane comes down basically straight away, immediately as he says his name. And he going down the ramp, and Angle decides just to completely go hell to leather, and he smashes Kane with the ring bell over the face before the match even officially begins. Then we get into the matchup, and that aggression just sort of like transpires into the contest. Angle dominates the most of it, to be fair. He's very much in control from start to probably about a good like 60% of the way through. That sort of like sees a Kane comeback at some point, which is going pretty well, to be fair. He has a pretty good run from that. Angle turned things back around, a little bit back and forth towards the late stages. And then we get to a point where Kane's on the top rope. Angle reacts pretty quickly, and he gets back up to his feet, gets the second rope and hits some sort of like variation of a suplex. You could call it probably a number of things, but either way, it's very impressive. Flips Kane over onto his back onto the mat, and Angle then goes for an Angle slam, which Kane reverses into an attempted choke slam. Angle then sort of reverses that into a pinfall of his own, and gets a foot on the rope. So a little bit of dirty antics there, and that would be enough to get him the victory in the end. So yeah, definitely a solid heel performance here from Angle, and just generally speaking, a really fun match to watch. Like I found myself very invested and interested in how this one took place. I thought Angle especially looked fantastic in this one, just looked brilliant. He showcased himself very, very well. And yeah, Kane coming back into it late on made for quite an interesting second half of the contest. Well, like last sort of like third of it, maybe, if you want to say. But yeah, just generally speaking, just a really, really solid, decent display of two men with very different approaches to a match, but they worked really well together. They gelled very well. There wasn't sort of like a lack of chemistry. it just seemed to all just like move along really nicely. So yeah, I enjoyed this one. I gave an 8 out of 10. I think probably like you said, the first match of some real sort of like big quality throughout it. I like the Regal and RVD match, but I think this one was a big step up from that one. I think 8 out of 10 is pretty deserving from it. But yeah, really solid contest. I thought it was it was great to watch. How high did you rate this one, Nick? You said it was your first good match of the night. How good was it for you?
Yeah, and as you kind of said, we expect, you know, these quality outings from Angle, and who is a great heel, and I would argue probably his best moments in WWE do come from his heel work. But I think a shout out deserves to be put out to Kane as well. Kane has a pretty consistent track record himself, and in my head, you know, just gets kind of thrown in the big guy category. But I don't think that's accurate. I don't think that's fair. I think Kane is much better than his size kind of denotes. You know, typically thinking of that big man style, which I'm typically not a fan of. I typically prefer the technical side of wrestling, the Kurt Angle, if you will, the execution side. So, but yeah, Kane just kind of gels with whoever he's put in there with, and obviously with the mask it limits his ability to do other things. But in terms of an in-ring perspective, you know, I think he's much more decent than is much better than the big man kind of trope that often comes along with the someone of his size. But yeah, this one had a little bit of everything, and some pretty good back and forth. And as you mentioned, just the styles just gelled well together. And I honestly didn't know who was going to win the match because it was so back and forth, and the number of counters here was fun to watch. And, you know, I don't love the finish. You know, the ropes to win. Yeah, kind of gets combined with the roll ups. You know, definitely doesn't seem like a Mania way to end a match. But in this instance, you know, I think Kane was going for a chokeslam at that moment, so it just felt like, you know, the final bit, kind of the way the match was going, another reversal and a sudden way to up the heel work of Kurt Angle, who was you know, living up to the expectations of that cocky Olympic gold medalist. So yeah, it worked out for me. I gave this one a 7.5 out of 10. Just was a fun match, and the first match that actually had double digit amount of time in 10 minutes. So yeah, just this one felt like it belonged on the WrestleMania stage, and to this point, that was the first one that did. So, with that, let's move into the next match. We have The Undertaker defending his streak at this point is at 9 wins, no losses, going up against yet another WCW acquisition at this point from that buyout in Ric Flair. KP, two veterans here already at this point, especially with Ric Flair. What did you make of this contest? As a no disqualification match due to Vince McMahon wanting to make sure Ric Flair got his punishment because before this he was part owner of WWE.
So I'd never seen this match before. I'd heard about it. I knew that it existed and it took place, but just never had the chance to really go back and watch it and just sort of like give it a go or a shot. Watching these WrestleManias back sort of gives us opportunity to really just see everything, you know, whether it's good, bad, ugly, whatever. And I can't believe I'd never watched this match before because this was brilliant. It was absolutely hellacious. It was a massive fight between both men. You know, Flair and Undertaker went absolutely to the limits with each other here, really. Especially Ric Flair. He looked completely broken about probably not even halfway through the matchup, to be fair. That blood just, you know, iconically all over his face and his hair, just tinting it to red. It honestly is such an iconic image. It's fantastic. But yeah, I mean, Undertaker was dominant and dominant and dominant in this match. He has so much say in like how the match flowed, how it went down, and he just absolutely battered Ric Flair for the majority of it. I think that's completely fair to say. We obviously saw signs of promise from Ric Flair here and there, you know, getting back into the fray and, like, you know, hitting the figure four and things like that, turning things around bits in here. But yeah, just generally speaking, it was an absolutely bloody and broken mess, you know, from Ric Flair in the end. But it was really, really good. Like, he showed a lot of heart to keep kicking out of big pinfalls here and there, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. For a no disqualification match, you know, obviously being linked somewhat to, you know, the company's sort of like position, like ownership and things like that. Yeah, I thought it was really, really good. It was a pretty brutal contest. You know, we get Arn Anderson in there, who was obviously very involved in the build-up here. Undertaker completely destroying him prior to this matchup at Mania. He comes down to help Ric Flair, hits a spine buster, and that promotes Ric Flair to come over and get a cover on him. But Undertaker does kick out at 2. Quite a shocking moment. The crowd are really invested at this point and really, really into it. Taker eventually does get back up to his feet and takes out Arn Anderson before then looking to hit a last ride on Flair. I don't know if Undertaker he either just couldn't do it at the time or something. Maybe he chose not to or whatever. But he sort of as he's going to go for the last ride, he then gets halfway up and then decides to sort of just drop Rick back down and then changes his mind seemingly on the spot and goes for a tombstone power driver. And that would be enough for Undertaker to get the win. But I mean, that's just a quick summary of the contest. This one went on for quite a while. It was a pretty long match. We even had a moment where Undertaker had basically just had Ric Flair down and dead to rights, and he basically just picked his head back up again. This happened on a couple of occasions, I want to say. He could have had him pinned, but he chose not to. He picked him back up and just carried on. And yeah, it just was a really captivating contest. Just Undertaker dominated so much of the early stages, you thought it was going to be an absolute bloodbath for the entirety, and Rick was just not going to get anything in. But that fight back from him towards the end, that's sort of they're not underdog, but the fighting from underneath sort of experience that he had to go through in the end. Yeah, it made for a really, really tense and awesome few minutes. I say few minutes, probably about 5 or 6, really, towards those late stages. But yeah, I had a great time watching it. I thought it was fantastic, and just I couldn't keep my eyes off of it because it was just hell to leather from start to finish. And yeah, just a really good matchup from both men. It's probably one of Undertaker's best matches at WrestleMania, and obviously we've been through them up until this point. There have been a lot of stinkers, but this one's definitely up there with his better performances for sure. I give this one a 9 out of 10. I absolutely loved it. I thought it was fantastic. Nick, what did you make of this one? As highly rated as myself, or do you find something else to talk about it instead? Ric Flair against Undertaker. Yeah, what are your general thoughts of this hellacious encounter?
Yeah, I would definitely agree that this is one of the better Taker Mania matches. Uh, having Ric Flair in there north of 50, pretty impressive in his own right. Obviously, this wasn't the end of his career. And then having Arn Anderson come in there after Taker. That was one of Taker's victims to get Ric Flair to agree to this match in the first place. Obviously, the other being Ric Flair's son. Yeah, this one was very personal, and you could kind of feel that throughout the match. You alluded to Taker's false pens or pens that he didn't quite go through with because he wanted to inflict some more punishment. Obviously, Rick donning that crimson mask as he so seemingly often does, that always adds to it. And the crowd was really hot for this one. The crowd was really hot for most of the night, honestly. A very, very good crowd. It's a shame they didn't go back here for a Mania, but yeah, the crowd was really hot for this one, and yeah, that tombstone there at the end to kind of put him away. I think this wasn't the most impressive match from an in-ring perspective, but from a storytelling perspective, and the story that these two were putting on, I think kind of really kind of kicked it up a notch. These two are obviously amongst the best, but at this point, Taker's already 37 years old, which is crazy to think. And Flair being, I think, 53. So, yeah, they're definitely already up there in age. So, you shouldn't expect like a 5-star classic from an in ring perspective. But when you're able to sell a story like these two are, you kind of forget that they are supposed to be putting on this, incredible match. And not to say that the in ring perspective isn't great, it is good. But considering the story that they sold, it doesn't seem as important. So I give this one an 8 out of 10. Not quite to the efforts of last year's match with Taker and Triple H, but a very respectable and definitely in the upper echelon of Taker's Mania matches to this point at WrestleMania 18. And just like that, Taker is extending his streak from 9 to 10. So he counts up on his hands as he leaves the ring. And he has 10 undefeated streaks. So almost halfway through his undefeated streak here. Getting into the next match, we have the 5-time WCW champion Booker T going up against Edge. And all this is over a Japanese shampoo commercial. So make of that what you will. They definitely hit on that throughout this match. And a hair versus hair match was pitched for this idea or this match, which seems appropriate considering the reason they're fighting in the first place. But Booker T had rejected the idea, saying that he had just started growing his hair back out again and did not want to start over, as he would have been the one doing the honors. Obviously, Edge has luscious locks as well. So, yeah, this stipulation for that hair versus hair match was saved for a different feud involving Edge and Kurt Angle down the line. But KP, no titles on the line here, but two obviously very gifted athletes and great personalities. What did you make of this match here?
Yeah, you summed it up quite nicely there. It is two very gifted athletes here, and obviously it's at a very early stage of Edge's career, obviously being in those tag team matches at WrestleMania prior to this one, alongside Christian. His first singles match at WrestleMania, and yeah, this is a little taste of what we can expect to come from Edge in the future. But this one was pretty solid. It wasn't like the biggest match that you'll see on WrestleMania, and that's fair to say. After all, this was over shampoo, a Japanese commercial, like you mentioned. So I guess that's kind of wild, that we got to this point from that, and it seemed pretty heated because of all the situations. So they did a good job of selling it, really. But yeah, pretty solid between both men. I thought Booker had a very, very solid first half, dominated most of it, and Edge, producing that, lovely sort of face comeback towards the ending moments. I thought the final few minutes were great as well. Just really slipped between both men, to be fair. Booker was aggressive, and then Edge sort of like fighting from underneath, towards those late stages, and then just some really swift, nice slick movements between the two of them made for a good ending sequence. So Booker goes for an axe kick, and he gets a kick out of two from Edge after that. We then get a really nice sequence of reversals, sort of like, I think Edge goes for his execution, and Booker sort of reverses it. As he's reversing it, Edge reverses it back into himself, and then does eventually set up that execution to actually get the move to land, and then that'll be enough for Edge to get the victory here over Booker T at WrestleMania. So, yeah, I thought this was nice. It was a pretty solid, nice flowing, pretty well gelling matchup, and yeah, Edge and Booker just seem to have a nice one. Yeah, if you gave these guys another 5 minutes, this could have been a great matchup, to be fair. For what it's worth, I gave it a 7.5 out of 10. I don't know, maybe my Edge bias is coming out there, but I thought it was pretty solid for what we got. And yeah, there was no real sort of lack of quality throughout it. I just thought these two sold the story very well, made it sort of seem a bit bigger than what it probably should have been over just a Japanese shampoo commercial. And yeah, for what it's worth, I thought they did a great job of just putting on a good matchup here. So yeah, 7.5, pretty solid. Would have liked a few more minutes, but we can say about a lot of these matches. So not too bad for what we got. What did you make of this one, Nick? Booker and Edge. Was it worth the the Japanese shampoo commercials shenanigans going into it? The hair versus hair would have been really cool, but I get what you're saying. You don't want to really have Booker resort to that after just growing it out. So I guess it makes sense. But yeah, how did you make of this one?
Yeah, this for what we got was good, and this is just like the first two matches that started off the evening. It was good, could have been great, especially with these two guys in the ring. Booker T is, I'm not going to say and sing Edge's praises because I know you will and already have done. And most people that watch wrestling now are well aware of Edge. Still wrestling somewhat actively. So Booker T, I just feel like is a very underrated talent. Unfortunately, a lot of his matches that we see were in WCW. But he really is, like, obviously we know he's entertaining from his commentary currently, but he one of his promos before this match, he goes to talk about Einstein's theory of relatives. It just had me busting out laughing. Like the dude just knows how to entertain. And of course, this was alluded to by commentary team throughout the match. But he can also go in the ring. Like it's very, very impressive in the ring as well. Obviously, so is Edge. So this was a good back and forth, and both these guys kind of just putting on that talent. Plenty of back and forth here, and yeah, Edge just getting the win. After landing that execution. It was a bit of a slap in the face to Booker T after Edge hitting his Edge Rooney, I think, as the commentary dubbed it, to land that and then also lose the match. Gotta feel bad for Booker T. Just kind of shines a light in his booking in WWE for the most part, but yeah, a common trend though. for the rating, I gave this one a 6.5 out of 10. But I'm sure if you are, if you've never seen this Mania before, a lot of these fresh faces, as in Booker T, as in Ric Flair, as in DDP, all these WCW acquired talents. I don't know if you picked up on this, but none of them have won. So, petty Vince McMahon coming in full force here. But yeah, I think give this match 5 more minutes, and I think this is probably one of the better matches on the card. Just unfortunately, just for some reason, 6 minutes was the magic number. Throughout the night for these singles competitions. And speaking of singles competitions, that's all we've had so far, and continues to be the case for a couple more matches. So if you like singles matches that don't go over 10 minutes, then this WrestleMania is right in your wheelhouse. But yeah, shame that this one didn't get just a few more minutes. That Japanese shampoo commercial meant a lot to these guys. So to have them go, I think at least 10 minutes would have been a bit nicer. So with that, let's go ahead and get into the next match, which has Stone Cold Steve Austin going up against Scott Hall of NWO. This is coming off of WrestleMania 17's main event. This match felt a bit out of place to me. Apparently, Stone Cold was originally slated to be the opponent to Triple H for the Undisputed title, but Austin had already grown tired of his heel gimmick and had demanded to once again become a babyface. So, further to this, Austin walked out the company the day after this event and would miss the first brand draft that took place and would walk out for good in June 2002. So, with that in mind, it kind of made sense to me. Obviously, going from the main event to a non-title match, and Scott Hall, an aged member of NWO, as a lot of that talent acquired from WCW was at the time. This ends up being a handicap match because Kevin Nash comes down to the ring with Scott Hall. And I do want to get a shout out to the ref. That the replacement ref was one of the cleanest ref slides. There are a few out there, but this one was very clean. KP, what did you make of the actual match itself? Obviously, coming off of his WrestleMania 17 event, I could kind of see Austin's point in being kind of put in the slot. But curious to get your thoughts on this one.
Yeah, the route for Stone Cold going into this one sounds certainly very interesting. Seems very last minute and kind of crazy, just everything that sort of like went into it type thing. But just generally speaking, how the match went down, it was kind of crazy. It had a lot of good moments, to be fair. I think I was on the edge of my seat watching this one, just generally speaking, like how it sort of like turned out to be. I thought it made Stone Cold look very, very great. And we see that a lot from him over the years, right? These big WrestleMania matches, he tends to look like a star coming out of them. And this one was no different. He fought through adversity in this one, obviously having to fight through both Scott Hall and Kevin Nash. So, that handicap dynamic that you mentioned already, it was very much in play for a good, at least like probably 50-60% of the matchup here, really. It did a good job for him, making him look fantastic. So I guess you can put that down as a positive for him. The NWO, though, obviously basically being dispatched by one man, I guess you could say was a little bit disappointing from their perspective. But just as the match goes on, you got Kevin Nash. He gets sent to the back by several officials after a pretty crazy match with loads of shenanigans. You even got one point where Stone Cold stuns Hall, but Nash pulls the referee out of the ring. Lays him out before then getting into the ring to back up Hall. That sort of begins the whole sort of handicap process here. They lay out Stone Cold, who eventually does fight back in the end. Austin hits a stunner on both Hall and Nash before a new referee. Before Hall and Nash. Before then, the referee comes down. That you mentioned, that extremely clean slide into the ring. It was crazy. Just absolutely flawless and perfect. Nash does go back up to his feet and sort of takes out the referee. Stone Cold sort of knocks Nash out of the ring and then ends up hitting 2 more stunners onto Scott Hall to pick up the victory a little bit later on. So yeah, it's basically a quick synopsis of how this one went down. It was a decent length match. These guys had a bit of time to work with here, and it wasn't a quick one that we obviously mentioned for previous ones already on this show. But yeah, I mean, I liked it. I thought it felt like a big moment sort of thing. Like, I think you mentioned the WCW WWF dynamic here at the time, and obviously these guys do take another loss here, coming over from WCW. So I guess maybe that sort of plays into it. They want one of their biggest stars in WWE looking very, very strong here against those guys. And I guess if that's the case, then I suppose, mission accomplished. So they did it there. But yeah, it had some really close moments, and I think they made for some pretty good spots here. Thought it was quite tense as it went on. So yeah, I enjoyed the dynamic. I thought it was good. And Stone Cold looked like an absolute star, as I mentioned already. So you can obviously pick that out as a big moment for him personally. So I give it an 8 out of 10. I can understand maybe people not really enjoying this one as much, but I just felt it was quite big and it was quite quite a monumental moment here. So yeah, I for what it's worth, I thought it was pretty fun. It was crazy. There was so much going on all the time, and just there was a whole lot to really take in. So yeah, I was a fan of it. What did you make of this one, Nick? Did it do it for you, or do you sort of like see it in a different light, so to speak?
Yeah, this match was chaotic. Obviously, we knew going into it with Nash being at ringside that it was going to be. But yeah, kind of alluded to by you and myself, throughout the night. WCW talent does not fare well throughout this event, and this is no exception. Austin basically took care of both of them, single handedly. So that doesn't look great. But Austin didn't want to be here, and I imagine the NWO weren't too happy about this result either. So. At least Kevin Nash and Scott Hall here, obviously. But yeah, this match was entertaining in that it was, Stone Cold just, opening up a can of whoop ass, like he does. So it was just kind of just comparatively speaking to 17, obviously a step down. But definitely looked strong here is Stone Cold. But in terms of a great match or anything, yeah, I wouldn't really put it out as that. It did get a few more minutes than the other kind of singles matches at 9 minutes, almost 10. Uh, and so maybe that's what a lot of these other matches needed with 3 more minutes, not 5 more minutes, just to break up a monotonous complaint over those singles matches. But yeah, this one, I don't know. It was fun for what it was, but from an in-ring perspective, didn't really shine. I think as much as it could have. Maybe have someone else come down to help Austin, but instead he just kind of took out both members of LWO here. So um, yeah, something was missing from this one. I give it a 6.5 out of 10. It wasn't a bad match, just didn't do it for me personally. Getting into the next match, we have the Dudley Boys with Stacy Keibler, acquired from the WCW, and Bradshaw of APA, Farouk and Bradshaw of APA, going up against the Hardy Boys and the current champs at the time, Billy and Chuck. This is obviously for the WWE World Tag Team Championships in a Fatal 4 elimination match. This is the 8th event of WrestleMania 18, and as mentioned earlier, this is the very first non-singles match. So definitely a theme throughout the night. Breaking that up here with a four-way tag match. KP, what'd you make of this one?
Yeah, this one wasn't too bad. It had a bit of a strange dynamic. I'm not the greatest fan of these sort of matches that have like the four corners being not all active at the same time. You've only got like two superstars able to be in the ring at once. I much prefer it when you do sort of have like, the actual traditional fatal four-way rule sort of thing here, where it's like one member of each team is active at the same time. So in that sense, yeah, maybe I would have liked to see a little bit different there. But we'll take the match for what it was here and discuss how it actually did go down. I thought it was, it was pretty fun at points. It was highly contested. We had a really early elimination with the APA. They were gone pretty early on. And I think after that, we had the Hardys and the Dudleys, and they just put on a pretty decent tag match together. We didn't really see a lot of Billy and Chuck whilst this was all going on. And it essentially turned into a 2-on-2 between Matt, Jeff, and Bubba and Devon. And for what it's worth, those four put on a pretty solid, middle section. And I guess towards the late stages as well, really. So, yeah, I thought that was pretty good. Like, it was quite a high-paced match. It was, there's a lot going on. Lots of nice tag team continuity throughout. A good length match as well. I don't think it went on for too long. I thought it was decent length, to be fair. Like, it didn't feel like it was on for too long, is what I'm trying to say. Just general flow of the matchup here. The basically how the eliminations went down. So the Dudley Boys would pin the APA, and they would hit a 3D on Bradshaw to get a victory. To get a pinfall elimination early on. The Hardy Boys then pinned the Dudleys after, like I said, a pretty decent length back and forth between those two teams. Devon ends up getting shoved off the top rope by Billy Gunn, and then he goes crashing through a table that's been set up at ringside by the Dudleys a while ago at this point. The Hardy Boys hit the Extreme Combination to pin Bubba Ray Dudley, And then we get obviously just two teams left. That'll be Billy and Chuck and the Hardy Boys. So Billy ends up hitting a famouser on Jeff after the Hardy Boys hit the Extreme Combination on Chuck. When Jeff kicks out at 2, Billy gets the one of the tag team title belts, actually knocks it across the face of Jeff Hardy, and that would be enough for them to hold on to their titles and get the retention here at WrestleMania. So yeah, like I said, it was a lot. You know, there was a whole lot to sort of like keep up with here. He had Stacy Keibler involved as well, in like a little bit sort of supporting the Dudleys, and yeah, she was a bit of attention at one point during the matchup, especially for Jeff Hardy, and just the flow of the matchup was kind of fun. It wasn't like a absolute clinic. I think you compare this to like the recent matches that we've had for the tag team titles in those ladder match and TLC matches. You know, I think those matches were a lot better than this one, but this wasn't like a terrible matchup. It was fine for what it was, and I did enjoy it. But yeah, I think that it just missed something. I'm not entirely sure what it was. Maybe it was the stipulation. Maybe it wasn't quite what I prefer. Maybe that's just a problem for myself to try and deal with. But yeah, I just thought it missed something. I don't know what it was, but it could have been better in my opinion. I gave it a 7.5 out of 10. Like I say, it wasn't terrible by any means necessary, but it just wasn't great. It was a good, solid tag match, but it missed something to make it go up to that next level. Yeah, maybe a little bit of an anticlimactic finish as well. I don't know. Perhaps it was. But yeah, not too bad. 7.5. Nick, how did you rate this one? Obviously, they had a lot to live up to with those previous tag team matches. You can't just have, the matches of those quality every single time. So how did this one sort of do, following up from that?
Yeah, I think the tune you're singing is the one I'm going to as well, and that is I think maybe a lot of this mania kind of suffers from that, in that when you come off WrestleMania 17, you are naturally just going to compare the two. And so maybe if we hadn't watched 17 before 18, maybe a lot of these matches would be better received in that aspect, especially this one, which obviously is going to be heavily compared to the TLC matches. That those are the last two times that those World Tag Team titles were defended. So naturally, you are going to compare them. I think a good amount of this match is being placed on the Dudley Boys and the Hardy Boys for obvious reasons, and I think that's the best part of this match. The highlight of it, and the biggest portion of this match, and I think that's rightfully so. Like you said, this match was entertaining, just comparatively speaking. It's not a TLC match, which was an all-time classic, so no fault of theirs, honestly. And the four corner or fatal four way, however, essentially with the tag team in each one, you can tag yourself in. I've never liked these, and it's been a while. We've had these on the Mania stage. I want to say it's been close to 10 years of Mania time that we've gone through these. They did have one in kind of the same way. It's just such an awkward dynamic. That it just doesn't really play out that well. I think you're better served to just kind of have a tornado style, just have everyone go out at the same time, like the TLC matches. I think that's probably better served here. But yeah, this match was good. You know, and the APA eliminated pretty quickly, and then Billy and Chuck kind of retaining here and kind of heelish ways. I think the most part and the focus is just the Hardy Boys and Dudley Boys trying to recapture the TLC without one of those members and a couple new teams. So it was decent enough, just not great. So I give this one a 7 out of 10, which is solid rating. But yeah, like you said, just wasn't as good. Getting into the next match, we kind of, for me, I think, and probably most of us, this is that match that this WrestleMania will always be remembered for. Obviously, this has Hulk Hogan, Hollywood Hulk Hogan of NWO, who is making his first WrestleMania appearance since WrestleMania 9, obviously 1993. So almost 10 years here, going up against The Rock. And quite possibly the most diverse crowd, one of the hottest crowds I think that I've ever seen. Obviously, if you've watched this match, you know of the crowd. The crowd is what makes the moment. The crowd is what changes the moment. And because of this crowd, the entire script that Rock and Hogan had planned was essentially scrapped, changed on the fly due to Hulk being cheered as much as he was. Obviously, going into this, Hulk was very much supposed to be the heel, being a member of NWO. which was a huge shock to both Hogan and The Rock. But it's crazy to think they had something else planned for this match. But obviously, just the respect being paid towards Hulk Hogan, obviously putting those years into the company. I'm kind of surprised that it wasn't maybe at least expected. Obviously, you have the like even in today's era, if you have the part-time legend come back, he's going to get cheered. So it's kind of shocking that they didn't think he would get cheered on the stage. And obviously, Toronto always been a bit of a rowdy crowd as well. So it's kind of interesting they didn't have that at least expectation that he may not be as booed as much as he typically was. But regardless, an all-time moment here. I think fair to say. KP, what did you make of this contest?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that this is the match for for WrestleMania 18, right? My match of the night. I'll just quickly lay out that there right now. This one was phenomenal. It just had that big fight feel, from the very start, even before the match really took place with the vignette, the promo package beforehand. Going into it, the crowd being absolutely electric and realizing what they're seeing here in the ring that's about to happen. And then, from start to finish, the crowd did not stop. They were utterly immense for the entirety. And I know you mentioned that already with the with the Toronto crowd. They were crazy. They had a really solid evening, like generally speaking. But for this matchup, they just turned it up another level. They were fantastic. Had a really great closing segment, closing few minutes. The sequence was fantastic. And it made for a really good passing of the torch situation as well. But yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed this one. I've never seen it start to finish. I've seen a lot of it, like highlights and things like that here and there. But just sitting down watching it from beginning to end, this was my first time. But I'm obviously very aware of the dynamic and the moment that this meant at the time and what it did, sort of thing. So the heel face dynamic was interesting because obviously Hogan was meant to be that heel going into it, and he got absolutely cheered, by everyone, and The Rock was getting booed and things. So to turn that around was quite nice, and Rock was sort of playing into it as well. So the character work was really good from that. Hogan was also doing his way of playing into the fact that the crowd was cheering him, and then they turned things around at the very end there, where I'll get into that in a second, but basically how the match does play out, you've got Hogan, who kicks out of a rock bottom pretty late into the matchup at this point. He hulks up. There's this classic, Hulking, and he goes for his leg drop in the end, hits it onto the Rock, but he does kick out at 2. He then hits 2 rock bottoms before hitting the people's elbow, and that is enough for him to get the victory at the end. And it's a pretty mixed reaction. By this point, the crowd are pretty just into the matchup, generally speaking. They're just loving both men just, delivering here. I wouldn't say The Rock got booed when he won. Don't think so. When I listened to the crowd at the time, they seemed to be pretty just elated anyway that it was just a quality matchup. So as far as I was concerned, that didn't really seem to be the case for him getting booed at the end. But we do get a little bit of post-match shenanigans because Hogan, he does extend his hand to The Rock, and Rock reciprocates. They show a little bit of respect between both men. It gets to a point where Rock does leave the ring, so he leaves Hogan in there, sort of like have his moment type thing. And then we get Nash and Hall, so, Hollywood Hogan's NWO buddies. They come down into the ring, sort of questioning Hogan's decision to maybe show respect and the fact that he lost, perhaps, as well. And they quickly just attack Hogan. They just straight up just lay him out. And then that sort of promotes Rock to come back down the ramp, as he's already halfway up at this point, but he rushes back down the ramp, comes to the aid of Hulk Hogan, and the two of them fend off both Nash and Hall before they stand tall at the very end, sort of thing. So yeah, Hogan does look to leave the ring pretty quickly, but Rock stops him, and they sort of have a bit of a time celebrating in the ring. Rock gives Hogan the opportunity to sort of like show off in his classic style with all the flexing, and you can see Rock's having an absolute well of a time. He's loving it, just being in there with Hollywood Hogan. You can clearly see he was sort of like maybe even fanboying at the time, perhaps, but just a smile on his face. It was a pretty quality moment, to be fair. Just that little post-match reaction from the two of them. But yeah, they leave the ring together at the end of this one. But it was a classic, right? This is one of the best WrestleMania matches of all time, from what people consider, and I can definitely understand why. It had that big fight feel, like I mentioned, and it just had so much going into it. The crowd was so invested, and they were so into it from start to finish, and yeah, just it flowed really nicely. Was it the greatest technical display? No. Did it need to be? No, not really. Despite, not having a masterclass of wrestling, it was a quality sports entertainment moment. It was just a huge matchup, which honestly should have been the main event, in my opinion. But obviously, I think that's an opinion that's shared a lot by wrestling fans that have watched this show. But yeah, I gave it a 9.5 out of 10. Just for me personally, I would have loved it to have been a bit more technical. Just the purist in me would have wanted that. But 9.5 is still absolutely solid, and I think it's rightfully up there with one of the best WrestleMania matches of all time. So yeah, testament to both men. They absolutely killed it. Put on a cracking match. What did you make of this one, Nick? This is a passing of the torch moment. This is a huge matchup. It is icon versus icon. But where does it stand in the greater matches of WrestleMania for you?
Yeah, and I think you kind of said it perfectly. This match is more so about that passing of the torch, more so about the moment than the in ring uh, perspective or the aspect of it. But that being said, Hulk Hogan for his age at the time here looks really good as well. We obviously heavily critique a lot of his Mania matches before this. That honestly, for being 10 years later, he looks decent here. Doing a bit more, obviously playing off the emotions of the crowd. Yeah, this match is, like you said, more so about the moment than the in ring aspect. Yes, the in ring aspect could have been better, but when you have moments like this, uh, with these two, icons of the industry, a lot of these people probably putting these two on their Mount Rushmore, if you will. It's just one of those moments like a lot of other sports, and they kind of hit on this in the commentary team. A lot of other sports don't get to see their all-time greats go up against each other like this, from different eras. So this was just a very unique, and definitely the match of WrestleMania 18. Is it the best in ring match? No, but it's the best moment. And so, with that, this is, not quite the levels of Rick and Sean, but it's not far behind, to have them kind of go at this here. Obviously, wasn't the last match of either guy here, so it didn't have that emotion level that Rick and Sean did. But after the match, to have kind of Nash and Hall come down to take out Hogan, and then Rock to save him, and then celebrate with the crowd for what felt like a good 10 minutes. For the people in the crowd that day, I think that's a moment you could never ever take away from them. Just super special, and just a great moment because of that WCW acquisition that we got to see. Otherwise, we may have never been able to see that. So, or at least, at the point where Hogan could still go in the ring. So, definitely an all-time moment. In terms of a rating, gave it 8.5, which maybe feels generous after, me dogging the in-ring perspective, but it was better, especially from Hogan's point of view, like I said. But sometimes it's more about the entertainment factor, and this match absolutely has that. So 8.5 out of 10 from me on that. Getting into the next match, and shame on WWE for doing this because they had to go after the Rock Hogan match and before the main event. Yeah, they're definitely put behind the eight ball, absolutely. But in terms of women's wrestling, obviously on the Mania stage, has been less than ideal, for the first 17 Manias, large in part. But I feel like this is leagues above anything we've seen on the Mania stage. So we're going to see if we can put a positive light on this. KP, what'd you make of the actual match here? Obviously, Lita going up against Trish, and Jazz defending her WWE Women's Championship.
Yeah, we've heavily critiqued, these women's matches up until this point because they have been extremely lackluster. They've been very quick. They've been more of a show than really just a wrestling matchup. And generally speaking, hasn't really been anything to really delve our teeth into and to actually sort of like pick out and, find a lot of praise to deliver. This matchup, though, does sort of go against the tide that we've had up until this point because this was a pretty solid triple threat matchup. You got Trish Stratus, Lita, and Jazz, who are very accomplished, in ring, all three of them, really. And they all showed that here in this matchup. This is by far and away, the best women's match in WrestleMania up until this point. So, yeah, I don't think it's even close. But yeah, really fast pace. I think that's generally speaking how the women's matches do tend to go anyway. Up until this point, they are pretty quick, like in terms of just being non-stop all the time, essentially. So yeah, it made for quite a frantic display, but it wasn't really bad. Like, it didn't slow down at all throughout the contest either. The women were showcased pretty well, which we don't get to say very often. So, in fact, this is the first time. So, yeah, obviously that's an extremely high, plus point here that we can take. And there was a lot of wrestling involved, which we don't normally see from women's matches. So, yeah, another nail on the head to hit there as a big plus point here. As the match went on, Lita is stunned at the top rope here. After Trish has sort of like pulled her down onto the turnbuckle, sort of stunning her in the process. Trish is knocked to ringside, and Jazz gets up to hit an avalanche fisherman suplex, and that'll be enough to get the victory. But look, proper graps in a women's wrestling match. That's the main point here. They were showcasing a wrestling standpoint. They weren't made to be just eye candy for the show. Sure, maybe people still saw them as that, and fair enough, let them do so. But they are presented in a manner which made me think that this was a little bit of a turning point, and they gave them an opportunity to express what they can do in the ring, and to actually put on a pretty decent wrestling matchup. So yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed this one. I gave it a 7 out of 10. I don't know if it's maybe because I'm comparing it to all the other women's matches up until this point, or whether I'm getting a little bit excited here, but I just was smiling from ear to ear because it was just a really solid, good triple threat matchup. Was it amazing? No, it wasn't. Was it terrible? Far from it. It was good. It was a good matchup between three women who deserve to be having good matches. So yeah, I like this one. I thought it was great. I thought it was good. And yeah, just a pretty solid, decent triple threat matchup. Nick, what did you make of this one? Turning point here for the women's division. Actually being able to sort of deliver a decent contest, not just looking to be eye candy, but actually something that we can think, what? Yeah, this goes down as a pretty decent matchup.
Yeah, like I said, definitely a far cry from what we've seen through the first 17 manias from a women's perspective. I don't know if this is the turning point. Obviously, don't know if every women's match ever took place in Mania after this, but it definitely feels like it should be. I'm sure we'll have a stinker of a women's match after this, but for what this was, when in the moment, comparatively speaking, it's absolutely much, much better. Most of our ratings for the women's matches, if they even existed on the card, were very, very low. So, yeah, this is definitely a nice breath of fresh air. And unfortunately for this match and the main event, I had to follow Rock Hogan. So, the crowd absolutely does not care about this match, so much so Lita was pretty upset after the match because the crowd was so quiet she could hear some pretty vulgar things being shouted from the front rows of this Toronto crowd. So with that, yeah, this was a quick, very action packed, and it deserved better than what the crowd kind of reacted to them. All time classic, no, but like I said, just so much better than what we've gotten so far. I'll give this one a 6 out of 10. Definitely at this point, if I'm watching, as a woman, I'm thinking, hey, maybe there is a chance for me. Now, did this stop King from doing King level comments the entire match? Absolutely not. But that just wasn't his character. It wasn't his way of commentating. But for what it was, this is a glimmer of hope for the future of women's wrestling. Getting into the main event, a topical one in that this one wasn't the main event, and this one was the main event and Rock and Hogan wasn't. So I think that in there lies probably the biggest problem around this WrestleMania and this particular match. This sees Triple H going up against Chris Jericho for the WWE Undisputed Championship. Yeah, KP, fortunately for me, I think the only thing I ever hear about WrestleMania 18 outside of The Rock and Hogan is that this match was the main event and it wasn't Hogan Rock. So, in terms of the actual match, what did you make of this contest main event of WrestleMania 18?
So, yeah, I feel like this is a very topical one. Is it a bad match? No. Is it an incredible match? No. Is it a main event or WrestleMania worthy match? Probably not. Maybe in the earlier days, but I think at this particular point when you got a card like it was, I would say definitely not. When you've got literally Hogan and Rock earlier on in the night, which I argue would have been the better main event matchup here between the two of them. I think probably everyone agrees with that. But yeah, I think it wasn't a terrible matchup. It was good. It just, I think after being after Rock and Hogan, it does sort of put it in a lot of detriment because of that reason. So yeah, they had a lot to live up to here with this one. And they didn't really hit the heights of that matchup. So it did sort of give it a little bit of a sour taste. Like you said, the crowd wasn't overly invested as much as they were for that previous matchup. So yeah, I think maybe the card order was perhaps a little bit scuffed here. But generally speaking, about how this one went down, it was decent. It was good, but like it just wasn't special, you know. Like Chris Jericho, I thought he looked pretty good for the majority of the matchup. He dominated most of it. Triple H sort of like have like an injury here going into it with his knee, and he sort of like played into that for a lot of the contest. And Jericho, you know, would punish that throughout the majority as well. Stephanie McMahon sort of on the outside, sort of like being in the corner of Chris Jericho. She basically playing devil's advocate here and essentially just telling him what to do and, you know, what to focus on and, like, you know, basically how to sort of like zone in and sort of take advantage of situations. She was a very vocal figure in this matchup, and she was a very physical figure as well. Got into the matchup at points where she was sort of getting face to face with Triple H, and just being a menace and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, a bit more about Steph later on, but yeah, just generally speaking, the match was decent. And yeah, Triple H was just on the back foot for most of it. He had to kick out of quite a few big moments, so he showed an incredible amount of heart in this matchup, and I think that's completely fair to say that, you know, he had to really sort of dig deep to get a result here. He even gets put through an announce table at one point during the matchup. I do have a main gripe with this one. As strong as Triple H looked, I thought Jericho looked particularly weak, and I say that he dominated a large part of it, so you could argue that made him look strong. But just because of how the match went down, Triple H only had to deliver one move, and he pinned Jericho. So this is the man that holds the undisputed WWE Championship at this time, and I feel like if you've got someone like that, they've got to show a little bit of grit. And I think this is a pretty poor way of booking the finish, to be fair. So Jericho hits Triple H with a chair, literally shoots him right in the head with it, and Triple H gets the kick out at 2. So Jericho looks to go for a dive from the second rope. This is after, by the way, Jericho had hit like lion salts and the walls of Jericho on a couple of occasions. Just generally had dominated loads of it. Put Triple H through a table earlier in the matchup, like I said earlier. So Jericho looks to go for this dive from the second rope. Not sure what he's looking for, maybe a clothesline or something. I don't know. But Triple H kicks him. He catches him with the kick, and he gets a pedigree, and that's it. The match is done after he hits that one pedigree. So very anticlimactic finish compared to what Jericho had put Triple H through up until this point. For just one finisher, I thought was a really lackluster, dull ending. And yeah, didn't do Chris Jericho any favors, to be fair, with that one either. So yeah, I don't know, especially when you got Stephanie McMahon as well being such a vocal figure in this one, and, you know, just really trying her hardest to help out Chris. It did make him look a bit weak in some respects. So yeah, I don't know. Triple H looks extremely strong coming off the back of this, which is fine, but yeah, on the other side of it, not too happy with how that one went down. But yeah, it was a good match. Like, I enjoyed it up until the finish. The finish was poor, but up until that point, I had a good time watching it. So I guess that can be said for something. I give this one a 7.5 out of 10. So like, it is good, but it's not great. And obviously, I've already mentioned the dynamic of the card. Coming off that Rock and Hogan matchup, it's tough to follow it. I know there was a match in between it, but even still, coming off the back of that one, yeah, it suffered in comparison. Let's put it that way. And with a pretty poor finish as well, it just had a bit of a sour taste. This is the final moment of the show. Yeah, okay, it's great for Triple H and obviously his return and, you know, his fight back from injury and, you know, he got to the top of the mountain once again. But the way he did it, I don't know. It wasn't for me. Wasn't for me personally. Nick, what did you make of this one? It is topical. It is a big one to talk about. But how does it fare, you know, in comparison to WrestleMania main events and to what should have been a pretty, very, very, very big title match?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think it's just kind of what you always hear, shouldn't have been the main event. So unfortunately, they did suffer a lot from that. I think Jericho is booked very weak here, and I think Vince viewed Triple H obviously very fondly. That was Triple H liked the big guys, and Jericho wasn't a big guy. He was quite the opposite. So I think that just kind of played here. There's also if you look up facts about this Mania and stuff and Jericho's career, I think Triple H was paid significantly more. Jericho had to go ask Vince for more money after this match after he realized how much more Triple H was paid. Because even though Chris Jericho was the champion, he wasn't being booked that way from an in-ring perspective and also a financial one. So make of that what you will. Yeah, I think you hit it almost the exact same way. This was far from the best main event. This was also far from the worst. This was a good match. Anywhere else on the card, I think would have been, looked upon quite fondly. But because this was the main event instead of the Rock Hogan, unfortunately, that's a moniker it's always going to get hit with. And you made some great points about the booking decisions. Obviously Triple H having come off that pretty gruesome injury to be able to take out Jericho so easily. Maybe this would have been better if we gotten the original proposed plan, which was Austin and Triple H. But unfortunately, Jericho just getting the kind of the worst business end of this. The crowd didn't really hate Jericho as much as they should have, provided he had Stephanie at his side. Triple H being a face is a weird thing as well. Spending largely most of his career as a heel. But yeah, the crowd was hot when he finally did win. There was that. But in the grand scheme of things, comparatively speaking to Rock Hogan, nothing close to it, unfortunately. And that is unfortunately what this match does walk away with. I gave this match a 7.5 out of 10, which is close to the top of the card. Uh, but yeah, it'll always have that moniker, unfortunately. And there's nothing else you can do about it. Shame that booking couldn't have figured that one out. This one wasn't going to be as popular as the Hogan Rock. So with that, WrestleMania 18 in the books. KP, hit us with your favorite matches of the night, and of course your overall thoughts and ratings, and we'll get this one wrapped up.
Well, obviously speaking, the match of the night for me was Rock and Hogan. That just was absolutely incredible. Just a really, really amazing matchup. Passing the torch moment was huge and just felt massive from start to finish. Ric Flair and Undertaker as well was my secondary match of the night as well. Just loved that one. Just the chaotic, frantic display that it was. It was just insane. And just generally speaking, yeah, a match that was sort of criminal for me that I hadn't watched up until this point. So very glad that I've been able to do that now. And better late than never, I suppose, right? So got there in the end. Generally speaking, though, this WrestleMania was very solid. I think when people sort of they think about the best WrestleManias of all time, I think most people naturally go to 17 in conversations, but not a lot of love shown to 18. And honestly, I don't really understand why. Yeah, sure, there are some questionable choices. Triple H and Jericho main eventing, that should not have been the case. I get that. I completely agree. But it does have a really solid card. I mean, the women's match being the best women's match up until this point, that's very easy to say because it just was. So that's obviously a big improvement on any that we've had up until that point. And just generally speaking, across the card, there are a lot of really solid outcomes here for me personally. I mean, I got 7. I got an 8, 9, 7.5, 8. 7.5 again, 9.5, 7, 9, 7.5 again. So it just generally speaking, it is a lot of like across the board, like quite high results here. So yeah, the consistency of the matches were pretty decent from start to finish. Obviously, there were a couple of things here and there that didn't go quite as well, but yeah, overall my ratings were only just very, very slightly rounded up to a 7.5 out of 10. So that's exactly the same rating I gave to WrestleMania 17. So I think it's probably on par with 17. To be fair, just I don't think it's any worse. I don't think it's any better. I think it's probably about the same sort of quality. So yeah, generally speaking, really solid WrestleMania for me personally, and I had a great time watching it. Thoroughly invested in most of the matches, and just had a really good time. Nick, what did you make of this one? Obviously, just generally speaking as a whole show, I think your results were a little lower than me, but how high did it come out for you in the end as an overall?
Yeah, so the average rating for me ended up being a 6.5, which is still higher than most Manias we've gone up to this point. But yeah, I think I kind of alluded to this earlier. I think just coming off the back of 17, this one felt like it wasn't as good. Obviously, a lot of singles matches in here too, and a lot of matches in here that I felt like, hit that moniker that we've hit so often, which is, wasn't quite long enough, didn't feel Mania worthy. And so I think that kind of plagues a lot of this card, at least for me. There were some good contests here. Obviously, the highlight of just the for the moment alone being Rock Hogan, I think, is the easy answer. But I really like Jericho Triple H as well, and I think I mentioned it in the last Mania. Triple H is an underrated worker, and so is Kane. Kane and Angle match was very good as well. And then obviously Ric Flair and Taker. Taker finally coming up with a new streak, and that is a streak of not putting on boring matches. So that was refreshing to see as well. And yeah, just overall, I think WrestleMania 18 is a quality, consistent. At least say that throughout throughout the evening, it's consistent and a lot of big name talents. I think the WCW talent coming over largely getting booked to lose. I think is a decision, and I think maybe that is part of why I just kind of didn't receive this one as well as I could have. I think for me, just kind of the pettiness of Vince having every WCW acquired talent lose definitely comes into play here, at least for me. It's just it was obvious once I realized that was kind of the trend going, that maybe took away from some of the matches. So possibly a bit, and then just a lot of mania matches that just didn't feel like they really belonged on that Mania stage, considering the time they were given. So with that, like I said, it sounds dark, but just I think it's just comparatively speaking to 17, kind of like Jericho and Triple H following up Rock and Austin. WrestleMania 18 just the follow up of 17, and I think gets hit a lot negatively because of that. But yeah, with that, WrestleMania 18 in the books, and yeah, we will continue this WrestleMania series. Obviously, we'll hit a WrestleMania 19 next week, and if you like what we're putting out here, please let us know in the comments below. If you have anything to add or think, have any facts that we didn't hit on, please let us know. We're open to constructive criticism as well if you have any of that to put out there. But for now, this has been WrestleMania 18, and this has been the latest episode of The Push with Nick and KP. Until next time, we'll see you soon. Take care.